Hi, everybody. My name's Katie, and I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Library's FrankTALK with Imbi Neeme. Hi, Imbi. How are you?
Hi, Katie. Thanks for having me tonight.
Pleasure. So, before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Library operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. I would like to extend that respect to the elders of other communities who may be joining us today. So if you have any questions for Imbi as we're chatting, please just pop them in the chat box. Everyone will be on mute so that we're not talking over each other. And we'll have an opportunity at the end to, I'll read out the questions and Imbi will be able to answer them for us. So Imbi, would you like to get started with a bit of a talk before we open to questions? What can you tell us about your beautiful debut novel, The Spill, and about the process and about publishing and everything?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Katie. I've been busting to tell you. I'm going to share my screen in a really kind of like technical wizardry kind of way. Just stand by. And is that okay? Is that good? You can see everything? Yep. Is that shared? Good. All right. So I just want to echo Katie's acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I particularly want to do this because storytelling has always been such an integral part of their lives on this land where I live, where I write, and where I tell my own stories. So I'm going to give you my author talk, and I'm doing this quite a bit, so I wanted to include one unique slide every time I gave this presentation, and that slide contains an outright lie. So at the end, I'll ask if you're able to tell which slide contained the fake news. All right, so here we go. Although, false start. So this is actually not my first novel. My first novel was actually published in 1976 when I was 5 years old. It was published in the annual school magazine. And I remember very clearly the excitement that I had of being able to have an idea and commit that idea to the page, and the satisfaction that came from that. And I was so proud. I was a published writer, and about a few years later, I looked back at this and realized that it wasn't exactly a book. It was a single sentence. And that sentence was, "The funny planet. One day a man went to a planet and explored it, and a rocket came, and a funny turkey came out and asked if he would join in a party in his rocket." What a sentence, huh? I always remembered that it was actually an alien, but so when I managed to get a copy of this recently, I saw it was a turkey, and a turkey with a capital T. I was kind of delighted. It was like the plot twist that I wrote for myself. So then, next, I entered the teenage years where I journaled miserably and wrote tortured and probably quite torturous poetry in between scowling and locking myself in my bedroom. This photo is actually of my actual diaries, the ones that remain. Thankfully, there were 8 years in all of word vomit and only a handful survived. So we should all thank the universe for that. Then I went to university, wrote a few short stories, and then embarked on a 2-year odyssey in Japan where I lived in a tiny apartment and wrote an earnest and probably quite terrible novella on a computer like this, which is probably more house brick than it is computer. I fancied myself an Australian Jeanette Winterson with some undertones of, I don't know, Kurt Vonnegut and probably Virginia Andrews. But I remember my dad reading the book and telling me that he thought I'd found my bliss, and I held on to that. So I felt like I'm on my way, except I entered my own personal dark ages. Between the ages of 25 and 37, I wrote virtually nothing. I did a couple of screenwriting courses in London, but I was basically too busy trying to have a career, getting married, and having 3 children. And all that time I still identified as a writer, even though I did absolutely zero writing. But, you know, identifying is half the journey, maybe. Then finally, after my 3rd child was born, I started writing again. I posted one too many long anecdotal posts on Facebook when a friend approached me and said, had I ever thought about writing a blog? She saw the frustrated writer inside of me, and after I Googled what is a blog, I then signed up for a WordPress account and started Not Drowning Mothering, and I wrote there for 4 years very actively, 5 posts a week. I generated something like 270,000 words, often with children dangling off me like Christmas ornaments. I'd get up at 5 o'clock and I would write like anything before people got up, and then I'd still be editing and pressing published while the kids were sort of getting ready for school or kindergarten. And it was during that time I developed this muscle, this kind of ability to sort of write so to go in and write hard any opportunity I had, no matter how small that window of opportunity was. So it was actually very, very helpful. And another thing then, so that helped me with my writing kind of muscle. Another thing that helped me build my resilience was I was then a contestant on Celebrity Big Brother in the UK in 2016, and it was an amazing experience. The media feeding frenzy really helped me build resilience, and I also made a lot of great friends. Then around 2013 in July, I embarked on the first paragraph of my first manuscript in this restaurant here, which is in central Dublin. I actually took a whole other year before I was able to write the second paragraph of my first manuscript, but that's neither here nor there. This photo is of me in June 2018, which was 5 years and 3 manuscripts after I'd written that first paragraph. And I'm standing outside the same restaurant, and that's my son about to photobomb on the left-hand side. And at this point of when this photo was taken, I was still 9 months away from winning the Penguin Literary Prize. So how did I get there? Well, persistence. This is my submission spreadsheet. As you can see, I submitted a lot. And in fact, this isn't the whole spreadsheet. This is probably about half of it. And so basically, whenever I submitted to a prize or a competition or to a publisher or a literary agent, I log it into this spreadsheet, and so then I could track announcement dates and results. And I hope you're looking carefully at it. If you see on the left-hand side, there's a long grey column with occasional bursts of yellow. The grey represents all my rejections, and the yellow is where I was listed or shortlisted, and the green is my actual successes. And in that case, my greens were short stories, because I was getting a world of no with my manuscripts. I always tell people that behind every success, there's at least 100 rejections, and it certainly was the case with me. So then I won the Penguin Literary Prize. People often ask me, what was I doing at the time that I found out that I'd won? It was actually a Sunday afternoon, which is like when nobody would expect to receive this kind of news. Anyone who's ever submitted to anything knows that come 5 o'clock on a Friday, you enter this kind of black spot where there's no emails of any note until maybe sort of mid-morning on Monday. So wasn't expecting it. I sort of was idly flicking through my phone. My stepdaughter was explaining the plot of The Shining to her sister, and when the email from Meredith Curnow from Penguin came in, I didn't even register that it was the Meredith Curnow and this was the email I was had been waiting for. So I sort of opened it without thinking, and then I gasped so loudly that that my stepdaughter thought that she'd just spoilt the ending of The Shining for me, but she hadn't. But the question that in the email from Meredith was very kind of coy. It was like, how do you feel about winning the Penguin Literary Prize? And I can tell you my answer was, I feel really, really good about it. I still feel really, really good about it. So we immediately abandoned all our plans for the day, and this is March 2019, so last year. And we went and had a celebratory lunch. And I remember going to the bathroom, probably a bit too much information there, at some point during the lunch. And I saw my reflection for the first time that day, and I realized how much I was smiling. And I took a bathroom selfie, not something that a woman of my age does very often, but I just really wanted to capture that feeling. And there I am. That's that's how it feels to win the Penguin Literary Prize. So then I had to sit on that feeling for a couple of weeks. And as you can see, there's so much emotion there. It was quite hard. I'm a natural oversharer. And then on the 17th of March, I flew to Adelaide to the Leading Edge conference to receive the prize. So as I walked into the event, Meredith, my publisher, just casually turned to me and said, would I mind saying a few words? Now, there had been no mention that I'd have to give a speech. And my immediate reaction was like, I haven't written anything as a writer. I always have to write things first, so I can't just like talk off the cuff. But then I looked around the room and there were all these independent booksellers, and there was actually an ex-Prime Minister in the room too, just by and by. And I thought, this is where it begins. This is where my capital A author journey begins. So I said, okay, I will say something. And I stood up at the lectern and I babbled incoherently for, I don't know how long, it felt like days, but it was probably only a few minutes. And then I ended by waving cheerfully to the crowd and saying, it's nice to meet you all, like some kind of PTA mum greeting new members. And my kids still tease me a lot about that. It's nice to meet you all. Yeah, kids are like that. So anyway, so what happened next? My winning manuscript entered the editing process, and that was, you know, quite the journey. And that's sort of between March and between, I finally submitted the final thing in October last year, and then there was waiting, and then COVID happened. And I started to think maybe my book won't go ahead, maybe the paper will be used for toilet paper instead. And then one day a box arrived, and here is what happened. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it because I've shared the sound.
What's up there, Imbi?
I think it's not.
It's like Back to the Future. Hey, George, this just arrived. What is it?
It's
for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you, Mr. McFly. It's for you. What is it? What is it?
So yes, that's what it's like to hold your book for the first time. So then, oh, we don't want to watch that again. Now we come to the spill. First question people ask me about the spill is, does it really come with a complimentary cup of tea? And the answer is very disappointingly no. So after we've pushed past all of that disappointment, the next question tends to be, what inspired the book? And the answer is, of course, a complex one, because there's lots of things that inspired the book. But anyway, I usually, when people ask me what it's about, I give my elevator pitch, which is no two people ever experience or remember the same thing in the same way, especially when they're sisters. And then after that, they ask me what inspired it. And then I tell them about this car crash that I was in when I was 10, and how I remember looking back over at the car and thinking the car looked fine while we were waiting for the ambulance alongside the road. And then later, when we saw the car in the wreckage yard that had been towed to, realizing it had been completely totaled. And as an adult, I was reflecting on that moment, or that image of the car, and thinking that I was a bit like that car, because ostensibly I was fine. There was a couple of scratches, I had a couple of stitches, but I felt the impact of that accident for like decades later. And so I started with that accident, and I started to fictionalize it. I put two fictitious sisters in the car and their mother, and I started to imagine where they had come from, where they were going, why the accident happened, and what happened next. Sorry, if you can hear my cat really wants to take over this presentation, but yeah, I'm not going to let him. He's not a very good writer anyway. So then, yes, there are kind of three main themes to the spill. The first one is sisters. Now, I find the sister relationship the most fascinating of all the family dynamics. I've got two sisters, and I have a lot of friends with sisters, and over the years, I've collected all these stories of like miscommunications and misunderstandings, the layers of, you know, tension that can build between two sisters, and but also the stories of, you know, great loyalty and love. You know, I could like talk about my sisters and then someone would say something critical. I'm like, you can't say that, that's my sister. You have that kind of knee-jerk reaction, that protection. Then the second theme is memory. I was really fascinated by the difference that there is between our experience of things and then our memory of those things, and how over time the gap between those things can grow, because we kind of twist and bend our memories to sort of suit the narratives that we like to tell ourselves. So I was really interested in exploring that. And then thirdly, this is more an accidental theme. I didn't set out to write a book that was sort of about alcoholism in Australia, but by writing some of the characters, it turned out to be one of the things that I ended up exploring. But I didn't really want to sort of like alcohol is bad kind of polemics of, you know, I wanted to look at the you know, the various relations, almost spectrum of relationships that people have with alcohol. So then how did I choose to tell this story? I basically structured the entire thing like a jigsaw. I had past chapters and I had present chapters. So in the present day, the two sisters, Samantha and Nicole, are dealing with the aftermath of their mother's death and start to uncover some secrets about the past that they didn't know before. And then we flash back, we keep jumping back to the past, which are kind of like, yeah, these puzzle pieces that I hand to the reader one at a time, so that slowly they can build their own picture and connect all of the different threads and all the different pieces of the story. So, you know, it felt like a really good device, and but, you know, I finished the book, and I think there was a slide missing, but let's just skip over that awkward moment and say, thank you for having me, Frankston Bruce, and here is my book. So just a very sudden ending, and I'll stop sharing my screens. Okay.
There we go. I've just unmuted myself. So you.
Did you
I
like,
have so many questions.
did you like the sudden ending though? So I think there was a missing slide. I'm like, hang on, there's something missing here. But anyway,
It's
like,
okay.
I'm a professional, I can deal with it.
Look, we had the essentials. We had a penguin. I don't know what else we could possibly need. I have so many questions, but can I start with this question? When you were naming the book The Spill, which I thought was a beautiful play on words given the themes, etc. I have to always be careful not to say too much because I don't want to give anything away to anybody.
Yeah.
But about that moment when you were like, oh, it's called The Spill, and it came to you that was the name of the book. What was that like?
It had a working title of Each Other when I began, and Each Other sort of to me had that sort of suggestion of togetherness and sort of separateness at the same time, which I think really encapsulated the sister relationship. But as I wrote that first draft, it kind of drifted away from that, and I just thought, no, it's not the right title. And I was thinking about different words for accident, for car accident,
Yes.
and I came upon spill, and it really was like that.
Yeah.
And then when I started applying it to all the things, I was like, oh my God, this title can work really hard. So
Yes.
I was, you know, it's the spilling, the spill, the accident, the spilling of liquid, of wine, maybe, spilling of secrets. But also I've recently kind of uncovered there's also, you know, like a leadership spill, because the father, Craig, has 3 different wives, and with every administration in his house, the house gets redecorated. So I kind of, I like that as well.
That is just brilliant. I love that answer. That's amazing. So let me also ask, how much of your own experience is in this novel? And I ask this because the book is dedicated to your sisters. And also, where are you in the order of you and your sisters?
I'm the eldest.
I thought you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
And most responsible and the favourite. And then I have, I have a sister who's like 3.5 years younger than me, and she lives in New South Wales. And we're trying to give her for that. And then my younger sister's actually 19 years younger than me, and she lives in London. So yeah, 3 of us. So in terms of like, well, you know, obviously with my sisters, you know, there've been times when I've been close to one and not to the other, and, you know, that sort of waxing and waning and pull and push. But I really have cannibalized a lot of my friends' lives. And in my launch speech, I said, look, if I borrowed from your life, I promise to repay it by way of baked goods. But I have kind of collected these stories over the years. And so that really fueled the thing. So the only thing that's really comes from my childhood is the car accident. And there's a question about whether Tina, the mother in the book, was drunk at the time. I say now that my mother was not drunk. There was no question of her being drunk. And I feel legally obliged to make that very clear for my mother. But yeah, but there are little things like from my childhood in Perth, and my school friends have absolutely gone ballistic over this book. They've set up a Facebook reading group where they're all writing about all the Perth references from the 80s. They're just having a field day, and I hadn't expected that, but I'm so touched, you know, that that's what they're doing.
How gorgeous. That's so nice. And tell me, because you write from the two sisters' perspectives in it, did you have to do anything to sort of get in character as you wrote as Nicole or as you wrote as Samantha? How did you have a little touchstone that would bring you into their psyche, or how did you do that?
It's a really good question, Katie. I kind of considered, like, well, I decided to think of the sisters like states of water. So for Samantha, she starts as ice and she slowly thaws and becomes sort of a more liquid form. And for Nicole, she's kind of like formless, like steam, and she slowly kind of solidifies and becomes like water. So so I always had to kind of remember that was sort of like my touchstone. But the voices, it was, I mean, I was sort of relieved when people did feel that there was a difference, because I always worry, they're both me effectively. Like, I'm a bit of a control freak like Samantha, and I'm also like hopeless at making sort of big decisions or expressing my desire in the way that Nicole is. So they're both me, and there's always that fear that they'll just sound both like you. But
no, I think that's such a fun way to write, that you just access those different parts of your personality and get to explore them all within writing. That's amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing technique, or a little bit about your writing routine? You're obviously very busy because you're working, there's kids and blogging and getting up early and writing. What does it look like for you now? Is there a bit more of a routine, or is it?
No, it's really like any opportunity I'll write, but there's not that many opportunities. Those blogging days really help me develop that muscle, so I am able to make the absolute most of any time I'm given. Winning the prize and being published obviously makes me give myself more permission to write. I mean, I've got a really generous partner. He's really like, you know, he would never judge me for writing, but I judge me for writing when the dishes go undone, or, you know, I just feel
it's a mum.
It's a mum thing. It's a mum thing.
Yeah.
So, but having said that, I do claim, you know, small windows of time. And when I enter the world of a novel, I start with a very small word targets, 250 words a day, and I do that every day, and that's enough to keep me in contact with the story, but also have a sense of achievement, so that I can do 250 words, shut the laptop, and then not hate everybody and everything that's not my manuscript. Because if I don't have that sense of satisfaction, then I'm like, why are you talking to me when I could be writing?
Exactly. It's a lot of resentment when people are taking you away from your one true love.
No, children, I know I had you, but really, do you need to be fed 3 times a day?
They're extremely needy, aren't they, children? And so you mentioned that you had spent time in Dublin and London and Japan. Tell me how you chose this, obviously from your own childhood and your own experiences, but how did you choose the setting? And do you have ideas for any other, if I could be sneaky and ask questions about any upcoming writing that you're doing, would you ever have something set in Dublin or London or Japan? Beautiful.
It's interesting. Well, actually, my first manuscript is set in West Footscray. My second manuscript is set in sort of regional Victoria and London. And my idea for my fourth manuscript is partly set in Japan. So there you
Amazing.
go.
Good.
Satisfying all of that.
Thank you.
Yes.
That satisfies me. I'm very happy with that. When you said Japan, I was like, I could see your writing style. I've been reading a lot of Murakami lately as well, so I'm a bit of Japan obsessed. But yes, I think that would be beautiful. Imagine.
Yeah, so can you maybe get some funding from Frankston sort of library
Okay,
to help
sure.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, good. All right, sorted.
Hold a lot of sway. I'll come and do some researching with you over in Japan. So what else would I like to know? So you did mention a bit about the timeline, but how long did it take for that very first draft? What was that timeline like to get that out from that first paragraph to a finished first draft?
So the first paragraph of this third manuscript, I think I started in about June 2017, and it took me about 6 months.
Okay.
So in that time, I did a structure workshop with a man called Anthony Yark, who's pretty well known in the Melbourne writing scene, and that was really helpful. Like, it was just the perfect timing for me, because I had this kind of bold experiment about the structure, like a jigsaw puzzle. So it wasn't linear, and like, how do I keep people reading if they're jumping all over the place? That was really helpful that I did that. And then so I gave my first draft to my beta readers, and I have 3 of them that are my kind of frontline readers, and they were kind of so dazed and confused that I almost put the whole thing aside. I thought, this is too hard. I'm asking too much of the reader. What was I thinking? And then luckily one of the readers was a writer. She's my friend Carly Napier. She's a beautiful writer. She kept kind of saying to me, so what are you doing about it? Have you gone back to it? And I was like, I think I might not pursue this one. And she's like, no, you should. There's something there. And because she kept pushing me, I eventually went back to it, and I found, often when people kind of give you feedback, they tell you what to do, and everything I was told to do, it didn't sit with me. Like, people wanted to set it all in the present and just keep flashing back to the past. But it was really important for me to have these kind of, these distinct chunks of past, so there would be that gap between what people experienced at the time and what they have chosen to remember. So that was something I really wanted to explore, and having flashbacks would just be about people's memories now of what they experienced as opposed to what they experienced at the time. So yeah, I had to kind of turn that feedback around and kind of find ways of making it sort of easier for the reader to orient themselves, and that involved changing it. So it was originally all in the third person, so then I put present day chapters in the first person, and then I was explaining, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and Carly said, well, why is that not a motif in the book? And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, there needs to be jigsaw puzzle in the book. So then I brought in Tina's love of the jigsaw puzzle. So it started to come together like a jigsaw puzzle, and eventually it worked.
Gorgeous. Now I've got a question from Heather. What are you reading at the moment, and who are your favourite authors?
Oh, at the moment, I'm reading 2 books, because I always have an audio book on the go, and I have a physical book. So I'm listening to The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, and I am reading The Book of Dirt by Bram Presser, which I'm desperate to finish, but I've had so little time for reading. And every night I just like have a little bit, almost like a little sip of brandy before I go to sleep. But my favourite writers, I think, the ones that have had biggest influence on me would be like Jeanette Winterson, Kurt Vonnegut, and actually Virginia Andrews, the Flower in the Attic series. Oh my God, that was like the best books. I read it when I was 11, the first book, all that incest and sex. And anyway, I think, that was the first adult novel I read, and I was so gripped by it. So yes, they're probably the writers that have had the most influence on me.
Yes, we must be the same vintage, actually, because I remember one of those books. Yes, it was a very fundamental part of my early teen years, was reading Flowers in the Attic. So can you tell me, so you've got your go-to people that read your manuscript before you share it then with your husband, or does he just get to read it once the book arrives, or when do you share it with the people you're closest to?
Look, I'm a bit careful. With my first manuscript, I gave it to everybody. Seriously, the postman expressed an interest, I'd be like, here you go. But what that ended up with, like, I just get so many contradictory sort of opinions, and be hard to reconcile that. So look, ultimately, I think the important thing is to think about who your target reader is and make sure that that's who you're sharing your manuscript with. Because they're ultimately the people, the type of person that you want to please. And no one's ever going to write a book that everybody's going to love. That's just impossible. So yes, I think that's always something that I a bit of advice that I give anyone who's thinking of sharing their work. But my husband, he did read an early, like a mid draft, and he liked it. When he read my second manuscript, when he got to the last page, he threw it across the room. He was so upset with me and with the way that it ended. It was very sad. He was just like, basically, damn you. I didn't get that reaction with the spill, but it was probably a good thing.
Beautiful. And tell us, so we saw your beautiful submission spreadsheet.
Yes.
And what is your favourite part of all those parts that are on the spreadsheet? What's your favourite part of the publishing process?
Oh, there's no part of the publishing process that I like. I love writing, don't like getting published. Look, I think that sort of, I always treated my manuscripts like a little boat that I'd push out to sea in the hope that it would find its like destination, and they'd invariably come back to me, so I'd push them out again. So it was always like, I always have it planned. Where will I send this next? Where will I go next? You always have a little bit of a pity party, but you don't let the disappointment stop you, because you just got to keep going. And I described it recently in an interview as I like to think of the spill as like one of the zombies from World War Z, when they're climbing the Jerusalem wall, and somehow my zombie is not like necessarily the best and the strongest, but it's pretty good and it's pretty strong. But just by stepping on various zombies' heads, managed to get to the top. Like persistence, I think, is such a key part of writing. And so you do need to kind of build that callus, that kind of resilience, like I did by being a contestant on the UK Celebrity Big Brother. Fake news. That was the slide, in case you didn't know. The slide.
I think the headshot gave it away. It wasn't quite the glam shot that with the background in the red. It wasn't quite the same.
All right, I have to work on my Photoshop skills.
That's right. You will. I've got a question from Gina. So Gina was asking about this. She's also saying, did you find that process hard on your faith in your work, or does it not touch it? That I assume Gina's talking about sort of not rejections, but the passing up of. It feels like you write for the joy of it, though publication is nice, she's saying.
I think that's true, Gina. I think there was a point where I was just writing to be published, because that was my burning desire. And I think in the middle of all that, there was a point where I realized that actually writing for the love of writing is the important thing, because really there's so much that you can't control about getting published, so much that you can't control. So, so if you lose sight of that love of writing, then it's horrible. It's really horrible. So in the middle of all of that, trying to get published, I actually returned to writing short stories. So that was a way of kind of reconnecting my love of writing, and having a few small wins. But I wouldn't say that rejection doesn't hurt. It always hurts. But I've learnt. Well, I've stayed true to my inner author voice and kind of written the stories that I've wanted to write.
Beautiful. Well, that's the thing, that published or not, if you write, then you're a writer. So you can be a writer.
Correct.
Continue being a writer no matter what happens.
Yeah, no, correct.
Heather, who actually works for Frankston City Libraries.
Hi, Heather again.
is saying hi.
Heathers. Are there two Heathers? Is that a coincidence?
I'm not sure.
Wanted to come so much she joined twice.
I'm not sure. So Heather says, hi, Imbi. Thank you very much for talking to us this evening. I've loved your presentation. I'm very much looking forward to reading the spill. We're very fortunate to have it as part of our, Heather's done a little plug for us, as part of our Read Now collection at Frankston Library.
Oh, okay, plug that.
My hands on a copy, she says. And she says, my question, where is that gorgeous big penguin in your photo?
It's actually in a town called Penguin in Tasmania, where I went for a wedding about 3 weeks after I'd won the Penguin Prize. So that's why I'm hugging that penguin. I was still, that smile from the bathroom selfie, that feeling was still continuing. So yes, that's...
That's gorgeous. And tell us, I loved when you were talking about the moment you opened the email and you realised you'd won. How about when you'd got the nod of, oh, we're interested in your manuscript? What was that? Was that via email or did they call you or what happened?
Oh, with the, when I was actually told I was shortlisted, that was by email as well. And that was, I'd actually forgotten that almost, like, I think the day before I got the email, I remembered that I'd entered the Penguin Prize.
Yes.
I really had turned my mind towards short stories. I decided I'm going to focus on a short story collection. I'm going to put away all of my manuscripts. Maybe long form writing is not the thing for me, and short stories are sort of shorter to write. It's not as much of a commitment, easier to share. Like asking someone to read a manuscript, it's like you're giving someone this big burden. So I had turned to short stories and then got pulled back into my manuscript by this single email, which changed everything, really.
Yes, amazing. And so you still get that pull towards writing short stories. Do you ever get a pull towards publishing more blog posts? Are you still writing on your blog at all, or?
I don't write on Not Drowning Mothering. I kind of, I sort of did a little underline on that sort of few years back. And mainly because my kids are kind of grown to an age where their stories were their own, and I really couldn't sort of share their story as freely as I had when they had no voice. Arguably, I should never have been doing it. Anyway, hopefully they'll never watch this and know that there's an opportunity there for some kind of legal action. Yes, but I do have another blog which is kind of called We Are the Same Wool, which I do maybe 2 posts a year, and it's where I try and write about writing and crochet at the same time, because those two things, really go together.
Oh, well, Marnie will love that, because Marnie likes her knitting things and her crochet things and writing, so there you go, kindred spirits there. So I've got another question here. What is your
I just saw Gina's remark saying I'm sitting here crocheting. I'm like,
yes, here we go. I think everybody, there's something about books and crocheting on a winter evening. How romantic. What does your family think of you being an author? I know you've done the disclaimer that during the car accident, your mum was most definitely sober, but yeah, what has their reaction been like?
It's been, my mum had to wait until it was a published book before I showed it to her. I was very clear about that.
Is that like not telling anyone what you're going to name the baby before the baby?
Yeah, it is a bit. I did get my stepmother to read it because I just wanted, because inadvertently I wrote about one of my cousins with my first manuscript. I thought I was borrowing someone else's story, and then my stepmother said, oh, you've written about such and such, and I was like, oh, I have. So I get my stepmother. She's my kind of the family, sort of the custodian of the family stories. So I just get her to do a check. I did offer both my sisters to read the manuscript before, like at the structural edit phase, and they both decided to wait until it was a book. My younger sister just got back to me today saying she'd finished it. So we, got lots to talk about at our next family Zoom. And I don't know about my middle sister yet. So we will see. But, everyone's known that this has been a life ambition. I've since I was 5 and had that amazing story about the funny turkey published. Maybe I'll write a sequel for that as my next book, the turkey and the rocket ship. I mean, such material. So
I love that experience has stayed with you. We've actually just launched a writing competition here for 4 to 18-year-olds to write about their time that they stayed home in isolation. And we'll be publishing it as a digital book on the BorrowBox app. And I just love listening to how thrilled you were once you'd committed it to paper and then it was published. And I hope that the winners of our competition get that same sense of being a published author and that it stays with them. And then one day they can go on to get a publishing deal. It'd be incredible. I love it. Okay, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I've got a question here. So what has been a career highlight for you? You looked pretty happy unpacking those boxes, I must say, that box of books. But has there been a particular book or an event or something that's been the standout highlight of your career so far?
Oh, look, nothing's going to beat the thrill of winning the Penguin Literary Prize. I mean, I was such a girly swat at school, and I won the English award and the Theatre Studies Award. I won a prize at university. So for me, like prizes, that's why I always use the unpublished manuscript awards as a kind of a driver. Like they would set a hard deadline for me and something to work towards. So the sort of, the Honour Society girl within me really, really loved winning a prize. It makes me sound like a terrible human being. But anyway, but actually, look, I think the real highlights have been the reactions from people who've read the book, like we've been really moved, not just by the spill, but other things that I've written. I remember writing something, my first manuscript, and I gave it to my entire book group to read. Now, what was I thinking? My entire book group, like seriously. But one of them rang me. She pulled over because she'd just been thinking about my book and she'd been crying so much. And, she was just like, Imbi, like that second half is so good. And then she's like fighting through the tears. And she said, actually, there's a lot of problems with the first half, but seriously, the second half is so good. And to have somehow elicited that kind of response from her, not that I want to make people cry, but that I connected with her so strongly, just was sort of, overwhelming. Like that gave me a thrill. I really loved that.
Oh, it's so wonderful. It's been so beautiful speaking with you tonight. I just thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we do sign off, just tell everybody, where can they find you online at the moment? Where's the best place to track you down and learn more about you?
Katie, I am everywhere. And I'll just share my screen again because my name is... there we've got the Penguin again, but you see my web address at the bottom, imbineeme.com. Yes. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm all of the places. Now I'll just stop sharing again. That's enough of me hugging a giant oversized penguin. So yes, I can be found most places. I'm not on Tinder. I'm just saying. Not on Grindr, but I'm on most other things.
I think there's some new ones. You've got Bumble and all sorts of things.
Oh no, too much. Why are there always new things? I can't keep up with all of this. I'm still with Ask Jeeves from circa 1994.
Still got a MySpace page. So Gina is saying, Catherine asked me to pass on her apologies. So somebody that was booked in wasn't able to come. So Gina, let Catherine know that she can watch the replay. She can watch the replay once it's been posted to our YouTube channel. So that will probably be next week. That will be on there. So let Catherine know that she's more than welcome to watch it there. So we have got the spill available to reserve now with your Frankston City Library's membership, as Heather was saying. And we've also got it as an e-audio book on RB Digital. So if you'd like to be like Imbi and have an audio book on the go and a physical book on the go, it could be the same book. It could be the spill. So there you go. And you can also purchase it online thanks to Robinson's Bookshop in Frankston. And I had a look today and they did have 2 copies there left. So you should be able to grab it from there. And we'll pop a link to their website when we share this Frank Talk on our social media channels. Please keep an eye on our website for some great Frank Talks coming up and on our Facebook page. And please join me in thanking Imbi Neeme for a wonderful Frank Talk this evening. Please keep safe, look out for each other, and we'll see you in our libraries when we reopen.
Thanks so
Okay,
much, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Frankston Libraries. Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate
Thank you.
the opportunity.
Thanks, Imbi. Wonderful. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.